morning. The conflict in Iran and across the Middle East is now entering its third week. So I want to take a moment to set out how we're responding to this crisis and standing up for the British people. Our priority is always the national interest, and so we have been clear and consistent in our objectives throughout this conflict. First, we will protect our people in the region. Second, while taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war. And third, we will keep working towards a swift resolution that brings security and stability back to the region and stops the Iranian threat to its neighbours. In recent days, I've visited community centres in England and Northern Ireland. And I know people are really worried about what this means for them. And look, I grew up working class in the 1970s. I remember how it feels when you're struggling to make ends meet. It's a knot in your stomach every time the bills come through the door. And that's at the forefront of my mind in meeting this crisis. So in a moment, I'll set out what we're doing to help people with the cost of living. But let me first give you an update on what we're doing in the region. We continue to work around the clock to help our people in the Middle East. As of this morning, over 92,000 British nationals have returned to the UK on commercial and government charter flights. Now that work continues, including to support British citizens in Lebanon. Our armed forces are working 24/7 to protect British lives and British interests and support our Gulf partners. We have thousands of service men and women in Cyprus and across the region. 3 squadrons of fighter jets working alongside counter-drone teams to intercept Iranian attacks. They are protecting our people, our bases, and our allies night and day. And I pay tribute to all of them. We're also continuing our diplomatic response. The Foreign Secretary has been in the region in recent days. I'm in close contact with leaders from across the Gulf and Europe and beyond. I met Prime Minister Carney earlier this morning, and I'll be meeting President Zelensky soon, because it's vital that we continue to focus on supporting Ukraine. We cannot allow the war in the Gulf to turn into a windfall for Putin. Now, it's clear the US operation has massively weakened the military capability of the abhorrent regime in Iran. The question is, what comes next? When the fighting stops, we are going to need some sort of negotiated agreement to constrain the threat posed by Iran, to limit their ability to rebuild their nuclear program, to pose a ballistic missile threat and arm their proxy militias, and limit the threat that they can pose to international shipping, which is hitting global supplies of oil, of gas and fertiliser, which is pushing up prices here at home. Now, we've already acted alongside other countries to release emergency oil stocks at a level that is completely unprecedented. But ultimately, we have to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to ensure stability in the market. That is not a simple task. So we're working with all of our allies, including our European partners, to bring together a viable collective plan that can restore freedom of navigation in the region as quickly as possible and ease the economic impacts. Now, because of the decisions that we have taken, the British economy is better placed than it otherwise would have been to weather the storm. Since the election, we've built up our national resilience. We are delivering the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War. We're investing in clean British power to boost our energy security and protect people working from volatile fossil fuel markets. And because we have brought stability back to our public finances, stability that I will never put at risk, we are in a better position today than we were at the start of the Ukraine war 4 years ago. Now, back then, inflation was 5% and rising. We brought it down to 3% today. And this isn't just about dry economics. It's about values. We built this resilience for a reason, to give us the space to act, to support working people, and shelter our country from the shocks, the volatility that is buffeting our world. And we are acting. So this morning I want to set out 5 steps that we're taking to tackle the cost of living. First, we have capped energy bills until the end of June, saving the average household £117. Now that's in addition to the Warm Homes discount of £150 for the most vulnerable in society. No matter what happens now in energy markets, in 3 weeks' time, your energy bills will be cut and then capped for the next 3 months. And I can announce today that we're giving a legal direction to the energy companies to ensure that every penny of the savings that we delivered through last year's budget is passed directly onto customers to keep bills as low as possible. Second, we have extended the cut in fuel duty until September. And we've introduced the cheap fuel finder, forcing petrol stations to publish their live prices to make it easier for drivers to choose the lowest price. Now let me be really clear on this. Back in 2022, when prices spiked because of the conflict in Ukraine, I campaigned for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, and we have raised it in government to ensure that companies can't profit from spikes in prices like these, and that money will go back into people's pockets. I simply will not allow companies to make huge profits from the hardship of working people. Now, this government was elected to stop that, and we will. That's also why we're going to support rural communities with the cost of heating oil. And this is point number 3. The CMA reported last week what every heating oil customer already knows. These are accounts of suppliers cancelling orders and jacking up prices. Now that kind of conduct is completely unacceptable. So if the companies have broken the law, there will be legal action. And because it's clear this market is under-regulated, we're going to put that right to ensure customers get a better deal. But we won't just wait for that. I'm announcing immediate support for vulnerable heating oil customers today, providing £53 million for those households that are most exposed. Fourth, we are pushing ahead with our long-term plan to build Britain's energy security and independence, because otherwise we will continue to be subject to wild fluctuations in oil and gas prices. We've already brought in £90 billion of investment in clean British energy, And that's enough to power the equivalent of over 20 million homes. Just last week, we committed to reforming regulations so we can fast-track new nuclear power stations. Now, this has been opposed every step of the way by those who want to resist the push for clean energy. They did the same throughout the entire period of the last government, and they won. But we see here, as we did with Ukraine, that this is a vital cause. Because until we get ourselves off the roller coaster of international oil and gas markets and onto clean, homegrown British energy, tyrants like Putin and the Ayatollahs will be free to attack our energy security. So we won't slow down on this. We will go faster. Fifth, we will continue to work towards a swift resolution of the situation in the Middle East. Because there is no question, ending the war is the quickest way to reduce the cost of living. And look, it's moments like this that tell you what a government is about. My answer is clear. Whatever the challenges that lie ahead, this government will always support working people. That is my first instinct, my first priority, to help you with the cost of living throughout this crisis. And I want to make one final point, because moments like this also tell you about leadership. Whether to commit British troops to military action is the most serious responsibility for any Prime Minister. I have been attacked by some for my decision not to join the offensive against Iran. But at every stage, I've stood by my principles, principles which I held just as strongly when it came to debate about the Iraq War in 2003. Principles which I believe are shared by the British people, that our decision should be based on a calm, level-headed assessment of the British national interest. And that if we are to send our servicemen and women into harm's way, the very least they deserve is to know that they do so on a legal basis and with a proper, thought-through plan. Now, there are others who would have made a different decision 2 weeks ago. They would have rushed the UK headlong into this war without the full picture of what they're sending our forces into and without a plan to get us out. That is not leading, it's following. My leadership is about standing firm for the British interest, no matter the pressure. And I believe time will show that we have the right approach, right on the economy and the cost of living, right on defence and energy, and right on this war, in the best interests of the British people. Thank you. And now I will take some questions. And I think, Chris Mason, I'm starting with you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. Given the frequency of huge government interventions in recent years after the pandemic and after the war in Ukraine, and where that's left the public finances, do you feel a constraint on whether you'd be able to offer any more support on the impacts of this war if it drags on? And if I may, you say the UK won't be drawn into the wider war, but you're willing to be part of what you described as a viable collective plan to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. What is the UK willing to do in specific terms?
Well, the two are linked, as you'll appreciate straight away, Chris, because the Straits of Hormuz is obviously vital in relation to the price of energy and the impact that that's having on the cost of living. So these are not two distinct and discrete issues. And on the Straits, we've been discussing this with partners, including European partners, Gulf partners and the US. And obviously, we need to look at the options. We've already got autonomous mine hunting systems in the regions. We're looking at options and expertise, but working with our allies on that. In relation to the bigger picture, look, my instinct, my first priority is to protect people in relation to the cost of living. And that's why we put in measures that are already there, the capping of energy bills, and to be really clear, because I know people are worried about this, that is in place until the end of June. It's actually a cut, because that's what we put in place at the budget, and then a cap. And a fuel duty through to September. And the announcement today in relation to those that heat their homes through oil, which is a big issue in rural communities and a very big issue in places like Northern Ireland, putting that in place straight away. As to what might happen in 3 months or 6 months, I'm not going to stand here and pretend to you that we all know what the situation will be in 3 or 6 months' time. We don't. The best way through this is to de-escalate and reduce the conflict, because that is the simple, most effective way to deal with the cost of living, and that's where we're putting our all of our focus. But look, you heard what I said about my instinct, and obviously we'll always do whatever we can in relation to the cost of living for working people. Thank you, Chris. Robert, I think I'm coming to you next.
Robert Preston, ITV. President Trump wants you to commit the Royal Navy now to keeping the Straits of Hormuz open. I think you're saying no to that. Is that right? And then, separately, you're seeing the picture that ITV published of Epstein with Mandelson and the former Prince Andrew in their dressing gowns. Why, in Jonathan Powell's words, did you rush that appointment, given that Karen Pierce was prepared to stay for a few months, and that's what the US President wanted?
Let me deal with the Straits of Hormuz, because obviously that's one of the pressing issues of the day. It's something I discussed with President Trump yesterday on the phone. There have been discussions going on in relation to a viable plan. We want to make sure that that involves as many partners as possible. That's been our stated objective here, particularly talking to European partners, inevitably talking to Gulf partners, and to the US, because we need a credible, viable plan, if we can. And as I said a moment ago, this is, to say the least, not easy. It is not straightforward, and therefore we have to make sure that we've got that credible plan in place. As to what the precise options are, as I say, mine hunting systems of ours are already in the region. We've already spoken about what we can do in relation to anti-drone capability. But this isn't just about what the UK can do, it's about how we play a part in bringing others together behind a viable plan. So that's where we're at the moment. Well, we're looking through the options. It is difficult, of course, it's difficult, there's no hiding that, but that's what we're working on in terms of a viable plan, because ultimately we need to get the Straits opened, otherwise the price of energy will remain very high for reasons that everybody understands. So it's part and parcel of what we're doing on the cost of living. In relation to Mandelson, look, the independent advisor has looked at the tail end of last week at the process we went through, and he said it was the proper process. Look, the process wasn't strong enough, and that's why last year I moved to strengthen the process, and we'll strengthen it again. My reflection is the process wasn't strong enough. The process was followed. But was the process strong enough? No, it wasn't. Now, I recognise that back in September, when the Bloomberg emails came to light, and it was then that I started the process of strengthening it, and will continue to do so. Thank you, Robert. Beth, can I come to you?
Yeah, thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, people are worried sick at the prospect of their energy bills going up by £300 or more after June. The Conservative government back in 2022 capped bills for all households through an energy price cap. It cost about £40 billion. You're not going to do this, are you? Can you just level with people that wealthier households are going to have to suck some of this up? And on the Mandelson files, your National Security Advisor said the process was, quote, weirdly rushed, and Mandelson was appointed before developed vetting had been complete. You told MPs in the House of Commons that due process was followed. Is there a possibility that you have misled the House when you said that? Thank you.
No, and the independent advisor looked at that very question, I think, on Thursday or Friday of last week, and answered it very robustly, that the process had been followed. the process wasn't strong enough. And amongst the changes that I intend to put into place is the fact that you can't announce someone until the vetting is finished. It wasn't an individual decision in the Mandelson case, that was the process. Well, you only have to look at that in the light of the appointment to realise that that needs to change. But on the due process, the process that was there was followed. The problem was the process wasn't strong enough. But ultimately, it was my mistake, and I have apologised for that, and quite right too. In relation to a wider point about energy bills, because I do know how worried people will be about this, and as I said, I've been to a number of community centres across the country where you can feel that, and I'm not surprised. We're not ruling anything out, but it is very difficult to say at this juncture what the position will be in July, which is when the current energy cap runs out, or what the position will be in September. And obviously our focus at the moment is de-escalating, dealing with the straits, and trying to find a way to limit the impact. My instinct is always to help working people in a situation like this, hence the energy price cap that we put in place. In fact, reducing energy bills, which is one of the measures at the budget, and making sure that is held until June, the work we've done on those that heat their homes through oil, which was a real cause for concern, particularly in the tail end of last week when people were beginning to fill up their tanks and they could feel for themselves. And this is an area where, in addition to what we can do through the money we've been putting in today, whether it's that or petrol, I'm absolutely determined to clamp down on anybody who may think of ripping others off in a situation like this. I've heard too many stories of deliveries being cancelled in order for the price to go up. Have to clamp down on that sort of ripping off. But I'm not going to say to you now, because so much is unknown, what we might do in July. We are going to have to do what we can do now to de-escalate, keep this all under review. And as soon as it's necessary to say anything further, I will obviously do so. But it's simply not sensible to say that in a number of months' time, not knowing what the situation will be, that the following will be ruled in or ruled out. So that's the approach that we're taking. Thank you, Beth. Can I go to Andy at Channel 5?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andy Bell, 5 News. So initially you said no to the President when he wanted to use UK bases for the first wave. It feels like now you're saying no again to sending any kind of, certainly any kind of shipping to open up the Gulf. Are you basically saying to him, there is no military way of opening up the Straits of Hormuz, we have to go for de-escalation? And presumably you must be getting worried now that your relationship with the President is getting pretty frayed.
Well, just to go through this in order, I said no to get involved in the initial offensive action and getting drawn into the war. And I stand by that decision. As I said a moment ago, many people criticised me heavily for that decision and indicated that they would have rushed into the war, only, in my view, for them to backpedal a week or two later when they saw the consequences of what action they would have taken had they been Prime Minister. In relation to the defensive action, whether it's what we're doing in the region, have been doing since the few hours after the conflict started, or whether it's the use of our bases, that is in collective self-defence of our people in the region and our bases. The Strait of Hormuz is then a separate discussion, and it is a discussion. We're not at a point of decisions yet, and I want to really stress that. It is obviously a difficult question, that goes without saying, in relation to how you safeguard maritime traffic through the straits. Everybody knows the geography and the risks. But we are working and discussing that with the US, with Gulf partners and with the Europeans. And I discussed that yesterday with President Trump in the way we often discuss things. So that's where we're at on that. There are no decisions having been made. It'll have to be something which is agreed by as many partners as possible, is my strong view. And we're not at that stage yet, but we are working hard. I discussed it with President Trump yesterday in the way that you would expect between two allies and two leaders. And as soon as there's more to report, I will make sure that you have that. Thank you, Andy. I've got Chris Hope from GB News. Chris.
Thank you, Prime Minister. GB News viewers are very, very worried about petrol prices, as you might understand. They don't understand why you won't open up oil and gas fields to try and bring down the cost, mitigate that against, of course, the dash to net zero? Why not open up those oil and gas fields? And just on the special relationship, if 1 is bad and 10 is good, how would you rank your special relationship right now with Donald Trump?
Well, in relation to, I do know how anxious your viewers and everybody else will be in relation to their energy bills, because there's a conflict going on. They will have their own views and worries about the extent of that conflict. And many are worried that it escalates rather than de-escalates. I'm clear we need to de-escalate. In relation to their bills in the here and now, we are taking measures to protect them, and I want to just make that clear for all your viewers, because for the next 3 months their bills will come down and be held down, and they need that reassurance, because some are worried that they're going to go up next week or next month. That won't happen. Obviously, we'll have to keep under review what happens elsewhere. If they're oil-based, and some of your viewers will be, the announcement I've made today is to give them help with that, because already their bills are going up and they're not within, or they wouldn't otherwise be within the scheme. On oil and gas in the North Sea, obviously that's going to be part of the mix for many years to come, so there's no difference of position there. We did make progress on what's called tiebacks. Your viewers may have seen that or not, but that basically allows further access into oil and gas in the North Sea, so that's already in place. But the question I'm answering or trying to address at all times is what are the measures that are actually going to take money off bills now or in the foreseeable future, and that is by ensuring that we've got a better mix of renewables and that we go to renewables. And there's no denying, because we've seen this firsthand now. We saw it in Ukraine, we saw it in the 12 Days War, we're seeing it again now. If you're on the international market for oil and gas, you're vulnerable to the price going up on the international market, because we, the UK, have little control over that. And our North Sea oil doesn't give us control over that, because we sell onto the market. What gives us control is renewables, our own homegrown energy, which is then more secure and more independent, which is why I think that we should go further and faster in relation to renewables. Let's get control of our own energy, so that whatever's happening on the world, we control what's happening in this country. And I think for many people, they'd say, by whatever means you do it, get control of energy, so I don't have to keep worrying that my bills are going to go up and down. I want to get to that place as quickly as possible, Chris. Thank you very much. Oh, look, I mean, it's a good relationship. We had a good discussion yesterday about the Straits, as you would expect. We're strong allies, have been for decades. But it is for me to act in what I consider to be the best interests of Britain. And I have to keep that uppermost in my mind. And it is interesting, for want of a better word, that those that 2 weeks ago were urging us to go headlong into the full-blown war are beginning to have second thoughts about that, and there's reason for that. The problem, as I pointed out to the Leader of the Opposition last Wednesday, is if you're Prime Minister, you don't get to come back a week later and say, oops, I made a mistake about that war, can I back out of it now? You have to make the decision that you genuinely believe is in the best interest of the British people from the get-go. Thank you, Chris. I've got Matthew Gay. Matthew.
Prime Minister. Matthew Gay, the Quid Squid Person for Finance. Life is about to get a lot more expensive for people in the UK due to what's going on abroad. Food and petrol are already going up, and energy bills past the price cap could also be seeing an increase, which a lot of people can't afford. So the government likely have two options: either do some of the stuff that you've already mentioned and find ways to cut these bills, or get more money into people's pockets. So with regards to the latter, how is the government planning to help people?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And both are really important, because we are taking measures to keep bills down, and that's why I can say that energy bills will be cut and capped for 3 months. At the same time, we need to make sure more money goes into people's pockets. That's why we've done a lot of work on things like the minimum pay, to make sure that that goes up, as it will go up in April, so people have got more money in their pockets. It's very important that we point out that wages are going up higher under this government than they went up under the first 10 years of the last government, because it will be a question of, for most people, how much am I getting in on a monthly basis, and can I meet the bills that I've got to pay on a monthly basis? And just to be clear, because I do think this is important, when I was growing up, we didn't have enough money in my house to pay our bills. So I know what that feels like, to be around the kitchen table really worried. And I do genuinely know that there are many people across the country who are having those conversations today, who are really worried about it. And that's why it's important that I reiterate that my instinct, my first priority, is to do whatever we can to protect them, whether that's cutting or holding bills, or whether it's making sure they've got more money in their pocket in the first place. Thank you so much. I've got Jason Groves, Daily Mail. Jason.
Thanks, Graham. Can I ask you a couple of questions about petrol? You've talked a bit about profiteering, but at the moment, obviously, the Treasury is getting a big windfall from VAT on petrol. Every 5p it goes up, they get another penny. Shouldn't you be giving that money back? And then, secondly, Nick Butler, who you may know, used to work for Gordon Brown and BP, was out this morning saying we could be facing petrol rationing in a couple of months. What sort of preparations are you making for that?
Well, on both those issues, I mean, on fuel duty, that is being held till September. And yeah, that's held till September. And I know people are urging me, what are you going to do after September? But that is 6 months away. There's obviously a lot of change that could happen in that period. And we need to keep the situation under review, and we will keep the situation under review. In relation to the supply of energy, obviously we're taking all necessary measures to make sure there is the right supply of energy. It's really important that we do so, and it will always be a mix of oil and gas and renewables. We're actually using more renewables now than we were in 2022, which is helping in relation to supply, but we'll keep that under constant review. Thank you, Jason. I've got Millie from The Independent.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Millie Cook from The Independent. Pat McFadden this morning appeared to play down Trump's warning that the future of NATO would be very bad if we don't send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, describing it as rhetoric from the President. How concerned are you about the breakdown of the NATO alliance, and would you agree with Mr McFadden that Trump's threats are just rhetoric?
Well, firstly, we are working with others to come up with a credible plan for the Straits of Hormuz to ensure that we can reopen shipping and passage through the strait. Let me be clear, that won't be, and it's never been envisaged to be, a NATO mission. That'll have to be an alliance of partners, which is why we're working with partners both in Europe, in the Gulf, and with the US. It's important that we continue that. It is not straightforward, and you can see that historically when there have been other conflicts that have affected the straits. But I do think that working with others, including the US, is the way to go forward. And I had a perfectly good discussion with President Trump about that yesterday. And, of course, as you'd expect, I mean, we are talking to the US at all levels all the time. Whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's Gulf partners, we are trying to pull together both partners and a plan in relation to the Straits. Thank you very much. And let me go to George Parker, FT.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said earlier that you simply won't allow companies to make huge profits from the hardship of working people. And you said that in the context of windfall taxes in the past. So I just wondered whether you were suggesting that if they carry on, as you see it, with this bad behaviour, a windfall tax or a higher windfall tax is a possibility. And secondly, taking you back to something you said right at the start, you said the longer this war goes on, the more dangerous it becomes. I just wondered if you could clarify what you mean by that and whether you feel the President shares your concerns.
Well, in relation to a windfall tax, obviously there is a windfall tax in place, and we continued and extended that. And you can see in a circumstance like this why it's so important that we did so. That's the argument I made in 2022, and it's the argument I make now. Obviously, it is important that we work with the oil and gas sector, and that's why we've taken a number of measures, including the tieback provisions that we put in place just a few months ago. In relation to the broader words I used, look, the longer it goes on, the higher the risk of escalation, and the bigger the impact on the economy and energy prices, and hence on the cost of living for families across the country. And that is why, in addition to the self-defence actions that we're taking, in addition to the work and discussions that are going on in relation to the Straits of Hormuz, we do need to keep working for de-escalation. In the end, however it comes about, there is going to have to be a negotiated settlement of some sort. We mustn't lose sight of that. We must talk to our allies about that, and we do. Obviously, we had a G7 call last week. I spoke to the President over the weekend, but I'm clear in my mind that the longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes, and therefore I'm doing everything I can to work to a resolution of this, but I'm not going to stand here and pretend to you that that is straightforward, that is easy, but we do what we do best, which is to work with our allies, whether that's the US, Europe, or the Gulf, and slightly further afield in the coalition willing, to bring about that end. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.